My daughter secretly recorded my conversation with my secretary and leaked valuable information about our deals to her boyfriend, who was the CEO of our biggest competitor. When I caught her and asked her why she did that, she told me her mom told her to do it because I wasn't good enough. I smiled and walked away. The next morning, I called my lawyer. But let me tell you how it all began. You should hear this. That was what my daughter said as she stood in the doorway of my home office, holding her phone in one hand like it was nothing more than a casual distraction. I didn't look up at first. I was reviewing projections, adjusting numbers, doing the kind of quiet recalculations that had built everything she'd grown up taking for granted. She stepped closer, pressed play, and then I heard my own voice filling the room. It was a private conversation. My secretary and I had been discussing acquisition timing, liquidity windows, and a pricing threshold that had never been shared outside a protected circle. I froze before I could stop myself. She watched my reaction carefully, almost academically, as if she were studying an experiment. When the audio ended, she didn't look ashamed. She looked certain. I recorded it last week, she said. You left your office door open. There are moments when time doesn't slow down. It sharpens. I didn't feel anger first. I felt clarity. Because 2 days earlier, our biggest competitor had submitted a counteroffer that mirrored the exact numbers from that private conversation. The same thresholds, the same margin limits, the same fallback structure. I'd assumed we had a leak in procurement. I had even scheduled an internal review for the following week. I hadn't expected the leak to be standing in my house. You gave this to him, I said quietly. She didn't deny it. He needed to know what you were planning. There was no tremor in her voice, no hesitation, just conviction. Within that first minute, I understood something that would take me weeks to emotionally unpack. This wasn't impulsive. It wasn't reckless curiosity. It was intentional. And intentional betrayal carries a different weight than careless harm. The competitor's CEO, her boyfriend, hadn't guessed his way into our strategic framework. He'd been handed it. I didn't confront her about the legal implications. I didn't mention fiduciary duty. Not yet, because something else mattered more. Why? I asked. She folded her arms like she'd prepared for the question. Mom said you weren't good enough to keep leading the company. She said you were going to lose everything anyway. She thought, maybe it was time someone stronger took over. There it was. Not just betrayal. Alignment. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Not because it didn't hurt. I smiled because I suddenly understood the shape of the battlefield. Anger would have made me reactive. Reaction would have made me predictable. And predictable men are easy to dismantle. I wasn't going to give them that advantage. My phone buzzed on my desk. A message from my CFO. We need to discuss the competitor's revised terms. Urgent. Reality has a way of refusing to wait for emotional processing. I glanced at the notification, then back at my daughter. She mistook my silence for shock. That was fine. Let her think that. You shouldn't have done that, I said calmly. She believes in him, she replied. Mom does too. That told me everything. This hadn't started with a teenage romance. It had started with doubt planted at the dinner table. I thought back over the past year, the subtle critiques from my wife, the questions about my leadership, the way she'd praised the competitor's CEO in casual conversation. I had dismissed it as social comparison. Now I saw the architecture behind it. 2 days later, at the office, the numbers confirmed what I already knew. The competitor had structured their bid aggressively, almost recklessly. They were operating as if they knew exactly how far we were willing to stretch, because they did. The board wanted to counter immediately. One of the directors leaned across the conference table and said, "They're getting bold." Bold wasn't the word I would have used. I kept my voice measured. Let's not respond yet. There was pushback, concern, speculation about market perception. But leadership isn't about matching noise with noise. It's about knowing when silence builds leverage. I adjourned the meeting early and asked my general counsel to stay behind. I want a full review of our structural contingencies, I said. Every clause, every exit mechanism. Quietly, he studied me for a moment longer than usual. You think this is internal? I think, I replied carefully, that someone is relying on information they shouldn't have. That afternoon, my wife called. Her tone was unusually light. Have you seen the news about the competitor's new strategy? They're making impressive moves. I've seen. I said. You should be careful, she added. Markets shift quickly. It wasn't concern. It was positioning, and I recognized it too late, or maybe right on time. At dinner that night, my daughter avoided my eyes. My wife didn't. She spoke about vacation plans, about expanding the house, about how exhausting corporate life must be for me. Every sentence felt rehearsed. I realized then that betrayal rarely arrives as a dramatic explosion. It seeps in slowly, disguised as conversation. 3 days later, my assistant forwarded an internal industry memo. The competitor had secured bridge financing to support their aggressive expansion. They were leveraging heavily, more heavily than prudent strategy would allow. It was as if they were certain their projections would hold, as if they were operating with inside confidence. I sat back in my chair and let the implications settle. If they were building on stolen insight, they were building on assumptions I could change. My daughter knocked on my office door that evening. She didn't wait for permission to enter. You're not mad? She asked. Should I be? I replied. She hesitated. Most fathers would be. Most fathers weren't CEOs in industries where emotional decisions cost millions. I'm thinking, I said simply. She nodded, but confusion flickered across her face. She expected confrontation, maybe punishment. What she didn't understand was that consequences don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they take shape quietly, in conference rooms and legal drafts and board approvals. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I walked through the house slowly. I had built it 15 years earlier, when the company was still fragile and every deal felt like survival. I had believed stability at work would translate into stability at home. That assumption now felt naive. The walls were the same, but the trust inside them had shifted. I sat alone in the living room, replaying her words. Mom said you weren't good enough. It wasn't the insult that lingered. It was the orchestration. My wife hadn't confronted me about doubts. She hadn't demanded change. She had redirected loyalty. A notification lit up my screen just before midnight. Market analysts were speculating that the competitor's move signaled an upcoming acquisition attempt targeting one of our subsidiaries. They were predicting vulnerability on our end. I almost laughed, because vulnerability, when misunderstood, becomes bait. By the end of that week, I had scheduled a private meeting with my attorney. I didn't tell anyone, not my board, not my CFO, not my family. There are moments when you realize the conflict in front of you isn't temporary. It's structural, and structural conflicts require structural solutions. I didn't confront my daughter again about the recording. I didn't argue with my wife. I let them believe their plan was unfolding smoothly. I attended dinners. I responded to emails. I signed documents. Outwardly, nothing changed. Internally, everything had. What they failed to understand was this. Leadership isn't proven when everything is stable. It's proven when someone tries to destabilize you and you choose not to collapse. I didn't raise my voice that week. I didn't demand apologies. I didn't threaten legal action. Silence unsettles people more than shouting ever could. And I could see it beginning to unsettle them. Because the competitor kept moving aggressively, too aggressively. Public statements, confident interviews, strategic hires. It was the behavior of someone who believed they were 2 steps ahead. They weren't. I didn't confront the competitor. I adjusted the board. I need everything moved. That was the first thing I said when I sat down in my lawyer's office the next morning. It was barely 7:15 a.m., and the city outside his floor-to-ceiling windows was still yawning itself awake. He hadn't even taken off his coat yet. He stared at me for a long second, searching my face for signs of panic or impulsiveness. He didn't find any. I wasn't there to vent. I wasn't there to threaten. I was there because something irreversible had already happened, and I intended to respond in kind. Everything he asked carefully. Every property, every holding, every personal asset tied to my name. I want them transferred legally and cleanly. Structured. Protected. He sat down slowly then, folding his hands together on the desk. He had known me for nearly 2 decades. He had handled acquisitions, compliance disputes, regulatory audits. But this was different. This wasn't corporate strategy. This was personal war dressed in legal language. This isn't about business, he said. It's about exposure. I replied evenly. And I won't remain exposed. There's a certain calm that settles in when betrayal clarifies your next move. I wasn't reacting emotionally anymore. That had passed the night my daughter played me the recording. Now I was operating with precision. I explained the situation in minimal detail, not dramatizing, not exaggerating. Confidential business information had been leaked. My wife had influenced it. My daughter had executed it. The competitor had acted on it. The chain was clear. He leaned back in his chair when I finished. "You're considering divorce." "I'm initiating it." He nodded once, slowly, as if adjusting to the speed of my decision. Most men wrestle publicly before making moves like that. They threaten first. They negotiate emotionally. I didn't have the luxury of drawn-out theatrics. The trust was already broken. Divorce was simply paperwork catching up with reality. My phone buzzed on the table between us. A message from my CFO. "Competitor just announced expanded credit facility. They're doubling down." I glanced at the screen and set it face down again. Doubling down meant leverage. Leverage meant risk. And risk, when miscalculated, becomes collapse. "Here's what we'll do," my lawyer said, turning toward his computer. "We'll establish an independent holding structure. Transfer all real estate and non-liquid assets into a protected entity. Your ownership will be indirect, legally separate." "Timeline?" I asked. "If we move aggressively, 72 hours for initial filings. Full restructuring within a week. Start today." He studied me again. "Your wife will contest." "She can contest what she can see." And that was the point. By the time divorce papers were served, there would be nothing in my personal name to divide. No properties, no shares, no accounts substantial enough to fight over. Everything would be lawfully transferred before she even realized what was happening. Not hidden, not illegal, simply repositioned. As I left his office, I felt something unfamiliar. Not relief, not anger. Control. The kind that doesn't come from dominating others, but from securing yourself. By that afternoon, I was back at headquarters, sitting at the head of a long oak conference table while the board debated strategy. The competitor's aggressive move had rattled some of them. One director suggested we respond publicly to reassure investors. Another proposed accelerating our own acquisition timeline. "Let them move," I said calmly. There was a pause. "You're unusually patient about this," one board member noted. "I've learned that when someone thinks they know your limits," I replied carefully, "the most dangerous thing you can do is change them." I didn't elaborate. They didn't need the full picture. What they needed was stability. Leadership isn't about confiding every personal betrayal. It's about shielding the institution from it. 2 days later, the property transfers were underway. My primary residence, our vacation home, 2 rental properties, and multiple investment holdings were shifted into the new structure. Legally airtight. Signed. Filed. Confirmed. My lawyer called me that evening. "It's done," he said. I thanked him and ended the call just as my wife walked into the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of wine, leaning casually against the counter like any other evening. "You've been distracted lately," she observed. "Busy," I corrected. She smiled faintly. "The competitor seems confident. Maybe you should consider partnering instead of competing." There it was again, that subtle positioning, as if she were already envisioning a future where my company wasn't leading anymore. "I'll consider everything," I said. Later that night, my daughter sent me a text from upstairs. "Are you okay?" It was almost ironic. Concern delivered after Sabotage. "I'm fine," I replied. 3 days after my meeting with the lawyer, I signed the final divorce petition. It was clean, direct, no dramatic accusations, no emotional paragraphs, just facts. Irretrievable breakdown. Legal dissolution requested. Papers scheduled to be served the following evening. The same afternoon, I received another update from my CFO. The competitor had committed to a large-scale infrastructure expansion based on projections that mirrored the information stolen from my office. They were allocating capital aggressively, betting heavily on a market condition that, until now, I had planned to maintain. Until now. I called my general counsel and requested a private review of our contingency clauses, specifically one that allowed us to pivot supply agreements under revised internal valuation models. It was a clause I had insisted on years ago, despite pushback that it was unnecessary. I had argued that flexibility wasn't weakness. It was insurance. Now it was leverage. That evening, just after dinner, the doorbell rang. My wife frowned slightly as a courier handed her an envelope. She glanced at the return label and then at me. "What is this?" she asked. "You should open it," I said calmly. She did. Her expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief within seconds. "You're divorcing me?" she demanded. "Yes." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Over what?" "You're being dramatic." I didn't respond immediately. Silence is more unsettling than explanation. "You think you can scare me?" she continued. "Half of everything is still mine." There was confidence in her voice, the kind built on assumption. "You should speak to your attorney," I said evenly. She stormed out of the room, already dialing her phone. My daughter stood frozen near the hallway, eyes wide, confusion written across her face. "You're serious?" she asked. "Yes." She shook her head slowly. "This is because of the recording. This is because of trust," I corrected gently. Upstairs, I could hear my wife's raised voice through the walls as she argued with someone, likely her lawyer. I walked into my study and closed the door quietly. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. An hour later, my phone rang. It was my lawyer. "She's going to contest aggressively," he informed me. "But discovery won't favor her." I expected that. There was a pause. "You're certain about this?" I was certain the moment my daughter pressed play. After we hung up, I sat alone in the dim light of my desk lamp and considered what most people misunderstand about betrayal. They think the breaking point is emotional. It isn't. It's structural. The moment someone weaponizes your trust for advantage, the relationship changes shape permanently. You can forgive emotion. You cannot forgive calculation. The following morning, financial news outlets began speculating about the competitor's rapid expansion strategy. Analysts praised their boldness. Market commentators predicted they might soon overtake us in key sectors. My wife forwarded me one of the articles with a single message: "See." I didn't reply, because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the foundation they were building on had already shifted. They thought I was slow. What they didn't understand was that I was patient. "The board is calling an emergency session." That was the headline notification that lit up my phone at 6:12 a.m. It wasn't my board. It was his. My daughter's boyfriend, the CEO who had built his recent confidence on stolen certainty, was suddenly facing internal pressure. Financial news outlets were already speculating about liquidity strain tied to their aggressive expansion. Analysts who had praised him a week earlier were now asking whether the projections supporting that expansion were overly optimistic. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I simply set the phone down and poured my coffee, because this was the moment I had anticipated since the night my daughter pressed play. 2 days earlier, I had executed the pivot. The contingency clause we had buried deep in our supply framework allowed us to adjust valuation thresholds if internal market volatility exceeded a specific range. It was designed for economic turbulence, not betrayal, but flexibility doesn't care why it's needed. Once triggered, it gave us the right to renegotiate acquisition exposure and withdraw from preliminary commitments without penalty. The competitor had structured their expansion assuming we would hold our previous posture. They had leveraged debt against an expectation. When I shifted that expectation quietly, the weight of their assumption became theirs alone to carry. My CFO had hesitated when I gave the order. "This will shock the market," he warned. "It will correct the market," I replied. "There's a difference." By midweek, our revised position was filed, disclosed properly, and distributed through formal channels. We didn't accuse anyone. We didn't reference leaks. We simply adjusted our numbers. The ripple was immediate. Analysts recalibrated forecasts. Investors began scrutinizing the competitor's exposure. Their stock dipped modestly at first, nothing dramatic, just enough to introduce doubt. But doubt spreads faster than confidence, especially when leverage is involved. That afternoon, my daughter walked into my office at home without knocking. "Have you seen what's happening to his company?" she demanded, holding her phone up like evidence. "I have," I said evenly. "They're saying the projections changed because of you." "They changed because the market changed," I replied. She stared at me, searching for something, guilt, maybe, or confession. What she didn't understand was that I hadn't done anything illegal. I hadn't sabotaged him. I had simply withdrawn the floor he believed was solid. If someone builds a tower on borrowed certainty, gravity isn't sabotage. It's physics. You did this, she insisted. I responded. I corrected calmly. Her jaw tightened. Mom said you would try something like this. I almost admired the symmetry of it. My wife had positioned me as insecure, reactive, threatened. Now I was being accused of calculated aggression. The truth was quieter than both narratives. I was protecting what I had built, and I was allowing a man who relied on stolen insight to discover how fragile that reliance was. Later that evening, my general counsel called. They overextended, he said without preamble. Their debt exposure assumed your prior acquisition posture. Without it, their projected revenue timeline collapses. Legally clean? I asked. Completely. That mattered. Not for optics, for principle. I refused to become what they had implied I was. I wasn't vindictive. I was disciplined. There's a clarity that comes when you stop trying to prove yourself to people who have already decided you're insufficient. You stop arguing. You start adjusting. 2 days later, the competitor's stock fell another 12%. News outlets began using sharper language. Overreach, instability, miscalculation. Shareholders demanded transparency. Questions surfaced about how their leadership had been so confident in projections that now appeared unsustainable. One analyst publicly asked whether internal forecasting errors had occurred. I watched the coverage from my office, not with satisfaction, but with recognition. This was the cost of assuming access equals advantage. They had believed knowing my ceiling meant controlling my limits. What they hadn't considered was that ceilings can be raised or lowered without announcement. That afternoon, my wife stormed into the house before I had even removed my jacket. "What did you do?" she demanded. "I adjusted strategy," I replied. "You're destroying him." "No," I said evenly. "He destroyed himself by relying on information that wasn't his." Her expression hardened. "You're proving exactly why we doubted you." That word lingered. We, not she, not our daughter. We. The alliance was still intact, or so she believed. What she didn't see yet was that alliances built on advantage fracture when advantage disappears. My phone buzzed again. A message from a board contact who had connections inside the competitor's company. "There's talk of internal investigation." I set the phone down without comment. That night, I lay awake longer than usual, not because I questioned my decision, but because I felt the finality of it. There would be no returning to family dinners where tension was subtle and doubts were implied instead of acted upon. The line had already been crossed, and once crossed, it doesn't fade. It sharpens. By Friday morning, the competitor's board had announced a formal review of recent expansion decisions. The CEO, my daughter's boyfriend, issued a public statement defending the strategy, citing confidence in market intelligence. I almost felt sorry for him then. Not because he was collapsing, but because he genuinely believed the intelligence he'd received was strength. He didn't understand it was a snapshot, not a guarantee. Around noon, my daughter called me from her car. I could hear traffic in the background, her breathing uneven. "They're blaming him," she said. "The board thinks he misled them." "He made choices," I answered quietly. "He trusted the information he had." "So did I replied. There was silence on the line. She wanted me to say I would fix it, that I would reverse the pivot, that I would cushion the fall, but that would mean teaching her that betrayal comes with parental insurance. It doesn't. By the end of the day, the stock had dropped 23% from its peak. Financial commentators were dissecting the expansion strategy with clinical detachment. Words like reckless and premature replaced earlier praise. Investors who had once applauded boldness were now demanding accountability. I received a private email from an institutional partner asking whether we anticipated further volatility. I responded with measured reassurance. Stability isn't loud. It's consistent. That evening, my wife confronted me again, this time with less fire and more strain. "You've made your point," she said. "This wasn't about making a point. It looks like revenge." I met her eyes evenly. Revenge is emotional. This was structural. She didn't have an answer for that. 2 days later, the competitor's board announced leadership restructuring discussions. It was corporate language for something more direct. Pressure was mounting. Shareholders were restless. When confidence evaporates in public markets, leadership becomes negotiable. I received confirmation that night. An emergency session had been scheduled to consider his resignation. I didn't celebrate, because this wasn't victory. It was consequence. The next morning, headlines confirmed it. He had stepped down effective immediately. An interim CEO was appointed. The board cited strategic misalignment and financial overexposure. My daughter didn't come downstairs for breakfast. By the afternoon, another update surfaced. Internal legal review was examining whether executives had relied on unverified external intelligence in structuring expansion commitments. The language was careful, but the implication was sharp. My wife sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone as if willing the narrative to reverse. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "It isn't. Because corporate collapse is only one layer of fallout. Personal alliances built on advantage begin to shift when the advantage disappears." And I had a feeling the real unraveling hadn't even started yet. I didn't push him. I just removed the floor. He moved in with her. That was what my CFO said at the end of a routine call about quarterly stabilization, his voice lowering slightly, as if the information didn't quite belong in a financial update. I didn't ask him how he knew. In our world, personal and corporate circles overlapped more than most people realized. Country clubs, charity boards, discreet conversations between assistants. News traveled fast when reputations cracked. I leaned back slowly in my chair, letting the sentence settle into something solid and undeniable. My daughter's boyfriend, the now former CEO who had resigned under pressure, had moved into my ex-wife's house. The divorce papers had been served 3 weeks earlier. She had contested immediately, confident there was wealth to divide. Discovery had corrected that assumption. Every major asset had already been transferred legally out of my personal name. What remained under me directly was modest, almost unimpressive on paper. She had accused me of manipulation in court filings. My attorney had responded with documentation. Clean, timely, lawful. Her confidence had thinned since then. But this was something else. 2 days after his resignation, financial news broke that the competitor's board was considering internal litigation tied to fiduciary oversight failures. Analysts speculated he had relied on overconfident projections without sufficient independent verification. They didn't know the source of that confidence. They didn't need to. Markets rarely care about the emotional origin of mistakes. They care about consequences. That afternoon, my daughter burst into my office without knocking. "He ended it," she said, her voice fractured in a way I hadn't heard before. I looked up slowly. "Ended what?" "Our relationship," she replied, swallowing hard. "He said it was too much pressure, too many accusations, too much fallout." There it was. Loyalty evaporating under heat. I didn't say I expected it. I didn't say she should have seen it coming. There's a difference between being right and being cruel. She stood there waiting for comfort, for outrage on her behalf, for some shared condemnation of him. But I couldn't offer that, not without betraying myself. "I'm sorry you're hurting," I said evenly. Her eyes searched mine, confused by the restraint. "He said your pivot ruined everything," she continued, anger flickering through her sadness. "He said if you hadn't changed strategy, the expansion would have worked." I let out a slow breath. If his success depended on my consistency, then it wasn't strength. It was dependency. She flinched as if I had struck her. Maybe I had, not physically, but ideologically. She had believed proximity to power equaled power itself. Now she was discovering that proximity dissolves when conditions change. That evening, my phone buzzed with another notification. A real estate contact sent a brief message. "Your ex-wife listed the lake property." Of course she had. Legal fees accumulate quickly when anticipated settlements evaporate. I stared at the message longer than necessary, not because I felt regret, but because I recognized the cascade. Corporate collapse leads to personal desperation. Desperation leads to repositioning. 3 days later, the unimaginable became undeniable. My daughter showed up at my door with a suitcase. It was 11:43 p.m. I remember because I had just turned off the living room lights when the knock came. Not a tentative knock. A desperate one. When I opened the door, her mascara was streaked, her composure gone. "She told me to leave," she whispered. "Who?" "Mom." The word felt heavier than usual. "She said she couldn't deal with both of us under the same roof. She said he needed stability right now." I didn't react immediately, not outwardly, but something inside me shifted, not toward anger, toward clarity. My ex-wife had chosen alignment over motherhood, advantage over loyalty. Even now, where is he? I asked quietly. "In her house," she replied. "In your old bedroom." There are moments when humiliation attempts to ignite rage. I felt the spark and extinguished it deliberately. Rage would have been easy. Rage would have justified confrontation. But I had learned something through all of this. Silence disorients more effectively than fury. I stepped aside and let her in. She stood in the entryway for a long moment, as if unsure whether she was welcome. In truth, welcome wasn't the right word. Shelter was. "You can use the guest room," I said. She nodded, tears slipping down again. "I won't ask questions tonight," I added. She disappeared down the hallway quietly, and I remained standing near the door longer than necessary, staring at nothing in particular. Compassion is not the same as restoration. That distinction had crystallized in me over the past month. I could offer her safety without offering trust. I could provide space without providing status. The next morning, she came into the kitchen looking smaller than I remembered her being. "I don't understand how this happened," she said softly. "You aligned yourself with someone who needed leverage," I replied calmly. "When the leverage disappeared, so did the loyalty." She looked down at the table. "I thought he believed in me," she murmured. "He believed in access," I said. My phone buzzed again, another industry alert. The competitor's interim CEO announced restructuring plans that included significant asset liquidation. Debt obligations had tightened. Investor lawsuits were forming. The collapse was no longer subtle. She noticed the notification on my screen. "You're winning," she said quietly. I met her eyes. This was never about winning. It was about boundaries. Later that week, my lawyer called with updates on the divorce proceedings. My ex-wife had filed an aggressive challenge to the asset transfers, alleging intent to deprive marital equity. The filings were emotional, almost frantic. My attorney sounded almost bored as he explained the response strategy. "She won't succeed," he assured me. "Everything was executed prior to service. It's airtight." "I expected as much," I replied. When I hung up, I found my daughter sitting in the living room staring at her phone. Social media was ruthless. Comments about her ex-boyfriend's resignation. Speculation about scandal. Rumors about internal investigations. Her name wasn't public, but circles were small. "She won't answer my calls," she said suddenly. "Your mother?" I asked. She nodded. Abandonment has a particular expression. It strips arrogance faster than lectures ever could. I watched her grapple with something she had never experienced before: exclusion. That night, I made something clear. "You can stay here," I said, standing in the doorway of the guest room. "But I need you to understand something." She looked up cautiously. "I will provide shelter. I will ensure you are safe. But I cannot trust you. And trust is what defines family." Her eyes filled again. "I'm still your daughter. Legally, not for long. You made a choice," I replied evenly. And choices redefine relationships. It wasn't cruelty. It was truth. 2 days later, confirmation arrived that the competitor's board had authorized internal litigation to determine executive accountability for expansion losses. His name was no longer protected by position. He was exposed. My daughter watched the news silently. "I thought he was strong," she whispered. "Strength doesn't require stolen information," I said quietly. That night, after she went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen and allowed myself one long breath of unfiltered emotion. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a recognition that the unraveling was complete. My ex-wife had chosen him. He had chosen self-preservation. And my daughter was learning what borrowed loyalty costs when it's recalled. I let her stay, but I would never let her back in. "I didn't know she hated you that much." That was what my daughter said one night as we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, long after midnight, the house quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. She hadn't touched the tea I'd made her. It had gone cold between her hands. There was no accusation in her voice this time. No defense. Just confusion. The kind that comes when someone realizes they were standing in the middle of a war they didn't fully understand. Hate is loud, I said evenly. What your mother felt wasn't loud. It was calculated. She swallowed slowly, absorbing that. Over the past week, she had grown quieter. The initial storm of tears had passed, replaced by something heavier, recognition. Her boyfriend had stopped responding entirely after moving into my ex-wife's house. Not even anger anymore, just absence. And absence, I had learned, teaches faster than confrontation. 2 days earlier, I had received confirmation that the competitor's internal investigation had escalated. Preliminary findings suggested executive over-reliance on unverified strategic projections. Translation: he had built expansion on information that wasn't independently secured. The board was protecting itself. Lawsuits were being prepared quietly. The market had stabilized, but only after carving him out of the narrative. My daughter stared at the table as if replaying every conversation she'd ever had with her mother. She kept saying, "You were going to lose everything eventually," she whispered. She said aligning with him was safer. Safer for who? I asked calmly. She didn't answer. That silence mattered, because what she was beginning to understand, slowly, painfully, was that she hadn't been acting as a daughter. She had been acting as an asset, positioned, encouraged, directed. And once the strategy failed, she had been discarded. My phone buzzed with a notification from my attorney. Final divorce hearing scheduled. She's contesting valuation again. I showed no reaction, but I did register something quietly. My ex-wife was still fighting for resources she no longer had access to. It wasn't about reconciliation. It wasn't about regret. It was about recovery. That evening, my daughter looked at me carefully. "Are you going to forgive me?" she asked. The question wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It was almost procedural, as if she were asking whether a contract could be amended. "I don't hate you," I said after a long pause. "That's not what I asked." I leaned back in my chair, choosing my words with deliberate precision. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. I can forgive the fact that you were influenced. I cannot ignore the fact that you acted. Her eyes filled again, but she didn't look away this time. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "I see that now." There it was, the first full admission without deflection. And I felt something shift inside me, not toward softness, but toward clarity. Regret doesn't erase consequence. It contextualizes it. Earlier that day, I had finalized an amendment to my estate documents. My daughter's name had been formally removed from direct inheritance structures. A trust had been established for philanthropic purposes instead. It wasn't punishment. It was boundary. Access to what I built required alignment with its protection. She had violated that alignment. I didn't tell her immediately. Some decisions don't require theatrical announcements. They exist quietly in paperwork, shaping futures without argument. 2 nights later, she knocked softly on my study door. "I found out he's being sued," she said. "I know," I replied. "They're saying he misrepresented internal certainty." "That's accurate." She hesitated before asking the question she had been circling for days. "Did you know this would happen?" I met her eyes calmly. I knew what would happen if someone relied on unstable information. She absorbed that slowly. "I thought he was strong," she murmured. "Strength doesn't require shortcuts," I said evenly. She nodded faintly. That conversation ended without drama. No raised voices. No slammed doors. Just acknowledgement. And acknowledgement, I had learned, is the first step toward maturity. By the end of the week, the divorce hearing concluded. My ex-wife's challenge collapsed under documentation. The judge ruled the asset transfers lawful and executed prior to filing. There was nothing substantial in my personal name to divide. Her attorney argued intent. Mine argued timing. Timing won. When I returned home that afternoon, my daughter was waiting in the living room. "How did it go?" she asked carefully. "It's finalized," I replied. "And Mom, she'll adjust." The truth was harsher than that. Financial strain was mounting for her. Legal fees had accumulated. The lake house had sold below asking price. The competitor, her chosen alliance, was restructuring aggressively, shedding liabilities. Stability wasn't part of their household anymore. That night, I received a message from a mutual acquaintance. He moved out. I didn't ask for details. The collapse was complete. My daughter read the update over my shoulder. He left her too, she said quietly. Yes. There's a pattern to opportunism. It attaches itself where benefit exists and detaches when benefit erodes. She was seeing that pattern clearly now. I thought she knew what she was doing, she whispered. She did, I replied. Until the numbers changed. Silence settled between us again, but it was different now. Less defensive, more reflective. I ruined everything, she said suddenly. No, I corrected gently. You revealed everything. She looked up sharply. Trust that survives exposure is real. Trust that collapses under it was conditional. That was the only lecture I allowed myself. A few days later, I met someone for coffee. Her name was Elena. She wasn't from my industry. She didn't follow financial news obsessively. She didn't measure worth in leverage. We had been introduced months earlier at a charity event, long before the unraveling began. I hadn't pursued it then. My life had been too structurally unstable beneath the surface. Now, I found myself sitting across from someone who asked me about books instead of balance sheets. You seem calmer than most executives I meet, she observed. I've learned the cost of instability, I replied. It wasn't flirtation. It was truth. When I returned home, my daughter noticed something subtle had shifted. You seem different, she said. I am, I answered. She studied me for a moment. Are you replacing us? She asked quietly. No, I said evenly. I'm rebuilding myself. That distinction mattered. Over the next week, she began looking for work. Modest positions, entry-level roles, nothing glamorous. I didn't intervene. Consequence is most effective when experienced, not narrated. One evening, she stood in the doorway of my office again, but differently this time. No defiance, no entitlement. I don't expect things to go back, she said. I want to earn something real. I nodded once. Then start there. I wasn't rebuilding my family. I was rebuilding myself. You look peaceful. That was what Elena said to me on the morning of our wedding as she stood beside the window in the quiet suite we had rented overlooking the water. The ceremony was small by design. No press, no corporate acquaintances, no extended family-seeking spectacle. Just a handful of people who understood that stability isn't loud, it's intentional. I adjusted the cuff of my jacket and looked at my reflection for a moment longer than necessary, not out of vanity, but because I was measuring something internal. She was right. I did look peaceful, and that peace had been expensive. 5 months earlier, my daughter had stood in this same house, not this suite, but the one I had legally secured after the divorce, crying in the hallway because both the man she aligned with and the woman who influenced her had chosen advantage over loyalty. Now she was downstairs, not as a guest, not as family in the ceremonial sense, but as someone temporarily sharing a roof with me while learning what consequence feels like in real time. She hadn't been invited to the wedding. That wasn't cruelty. It was boundary. The morning light reflected off the water in sharp lines, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to remember the night she had played the recording in my office. The certainty in her voice, the alignment with her mother, the quiet belief that I was already losing. That moment had felt like humiliation. Now I understood it differently. It had been revelation. Exposure doesn't destroy foundations that are strong. It exposes where reinforcement is needed. My phone buzzed on the side table beside me. A message from my attorney, concise as always. Final asset protections recorded. Clean. Even today, even on a day meant for forward movement, structure mattered. Elena knew everything. From the recording to the corporate pivot to the divorce proceedings. I had told her early, not dramatically, not defensively, but honestly. If I was going to build again, it would not be on partial disclosure. Ready? She asked gently. Yes, I replied. Downstairs, the ceremony unfolded without spectacle. No elaborate music. No theatrical vows. Just two people choosing stability deliberately. As I spoke my promises, I didn't feel the need to overcompensate with grand declarations. Strength doesn't shout. It sustains. After the reception, modest, intentional, I returned home alone for a few hours before meeting Elena for dinner. I wanted a quiet moment in the house that had witnessed everything. When I opened the front door, I found my daughter sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing in particular. It looked nice, she said quietly, referring to the ceremony. It was, I answered. There was no bitterness in her voice, just distance. I wasn't expecting an invitation, she added, almost as reassurance. I know, I replied. She folded her hands together on the table, fingers intertwined tightly. Are you happy? She asked. Yes, I said without hesitation. That answer mattered more than anything else I could have said. A week earlier, my ex-wife had attempted to call me for the first time in months. I hadn't answered. She left a voicemail, her tone softer than I remembered. She spoke about misunderstandings, about how things escalated too far. There was no apology, just repositioning. I deleted the message without response. Some chapters don't require commentary. My daughter had overheard the notification tone that night. Was that Mom? She had asked. Yes. Are you going to call her back? No. She nodded slowly, absorbing something larger than the words themselves. Boundaries aren't announcements. They're consistency. That afternoon, as I stood in the living room reflecting on the quiet, she spoke again. Can I ask you something? She said. You can. Will I ever be your daughter again? The question didn't come with tears this time. It came with understanding that the answer might not be what she wanted. I sat down across from her, choosing not to rush the response. You are biologically my daughter, I said evenly. That doesn't change. That's not what I mean. I know. There are moments when you feel the weight of every decision you've made pressing against a single sentence. I had offered shelter. I had provided safety. I had not offered reinstatement. Trust defines relationship, I said finally. And trust, once broken deliberately, doesn't return because time passes. It returns, if it ever does, because actions rebuild it over years, not months. She nodded, but her eyes shimmered. So there's hope? She asked quietly. There's opportunity, I corrected gently. The difference mattered. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave for dinner, my phone buzzed again. A financial news alert flashed across the screen. The competitor had officially completed restructuring under new leadership. The former CEO, the man who had once stood confidently beside my daughter, was facing personal litigation tied to executive oversight failures. The market had moved on. Corporations recover. Individuals carry scars. She noticed the notification. Is he going to be okay? She asked. I don't know. I replied honestly. Do you care? The question lingered in the air longer than either of us expected. I care about fairness, I said finally. He made decisions. He's living with them. She looked down, understanding that the same applied to her. As I stepped toward the door, she stood abruptly. I'm trying, she said, almost urgently. I'm working. I'm saving. I'm not asking you for money. I don't want to be who I was. I paused. Then don't be, I said calmly. It wasn't encouragement. It was responsibility. That night, at dinner, Elena asked me something simple. Do you regret anything? She said. I considered it carefully. I regret ignoring early signs, I replied. But I don't regret drawing the line. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand gently. You're not cold, she said. You're clear. Clarity had cost me a marriage. It had redefined my relationship with my daughter. It had forced a competitor into collapse. But it had also preserved something more important, self-respect. When I returned home later, the house was quiet. My daughter's bedroom door was closed. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening to nothing in particular. Not because I doubted my decision, but because I understood its permanence. I had not disowned her out of anger. I had restructured my life out of necessity. Forgiveness may come. Reconciliation may not. And both are separate from access. They thought I would fight emotionally. They thought I would panic. They thought I would cling to relationships that had already been repurposed against me. Instead, I adjusted. If you've ever been underestimated by the people closest to you, if you've ever had to choose between family and self-respect, then you understand this story. Let me know in the comments what you would have done. And if this story meant something to you, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon in the next story.